Right now, I'm going to start with my talk, Leading with Agile Values to Apply Agile Practices Fluently. And if you're curious to dive even deeper into that, I just want to do a bit of self-advertising here. I created a program called the Software Engineering Leadership Lab. It's an interactive session. It's a series of interactive sessions. I'm really excited to do this. Advertising stops now, but if you're interested in doing more interactive sessions with me, check it out. So, leading with Agile values. First of all, I want to start with some typical complaints. So, very typical complaint is our daily stand-up takes too long. Is this a typical complaint by your team members? Emoji react if you feel like, okay, I've heard this 100 times. See some nods. Yeah, actually, I don't see the emoji reactions, but that's fine. Okay, so next complaint. We can't rely on the engineer's estimates, especially when you're a manager. You might hear that from the upper management. It could be a typical complaint by your manager that the engineer's estimates are really not accurate. If that's a typical complaint, bear with me. Then we have too many meetings, nearly everyone in every company, right? So um, if this is a typical complaint from both your team members and your managers, let's dive more deeply into how we can balance that, how we can use agile values to ask better questions of what does it even mean to have too many meetings and how can we make meetings more valuable. But before we dive into leading with agile values, let's talk about what are agile values anyway. And for that, let's do a little bit of history. No, first of all, let's do this interactive Slido questionnaire. So what agile values do you actually know? So you can use the link in the chat or you can use your phone to scan the QR code. And I'm excited to see what agile values come to your mind. People over processes. Yes. Togetherness. Change over plan. People over processes gets another vote. Outcomes over outputs. Yes. Transparency. Not fixed by time cost. Adaptation. Yeah. Inspect and adapt. Definitely a very important principle. 6 participants are still typing, so let's see what comes. Collaboration, responding to change. Yes, definitely. Client-driven, cycles, first things first. Yeah, prioritization. Negotiate over contracts. So a lot of citations here from the Agile Manifesto. Iterate, accountability. 1 participant still typing. Okay, that's it. Yeah, thank you all for sharing. Okay, now I know what I can build on. That's perfect. Um, so let's go back to the roots. So some of you already mentioned something, and I would like to know from you, who of you knows the Agile Manifesto? Who of you knows XP? And who of you knows Scrum? I'm very excited to see how deep into the roots of Agile are you. No blame here. I'm just trying to understand my audience. Okay, so 14 participated, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, I think that's fine. So thanks for your participation. This is exactly as I expected it. Most of you know Scrum. That's a uh, very typical knowledge. It's very standardized knowledge. some of, or also most of you, but not as much as know Scrum, know the Agile Manifesto. And as I said, most of you already quoted it in my first question. And only a third of you know XP. And when I'm talking about XP, I'm not talking about Windows XP, but I'm talking about extreme programming. And this is what I want to dive into now. So the roots of Agile ways of working. So first of all, the Agile Manifesto, it was signed in 2001 by these loads of people. And that's already more than 20 years ago. That's, whew, I don't know, it's somehow frightening that some of these principles that are stated in the Agile Manifesto still are new to some people in business, but also it means that some people have learned Agile not through the Agile Manifesto, but through what the Agile Manifesto created, like, for example, more common frameworks like Scrum. Yeah, and if we look at where did the Agile Manifesto actually come from, we can look into extreme programming, for example, that was something that emerged in the 90s in collaboration. And basically, it's an Agile framework, and it has very common traits with Scrum. And what I really, really enjoy about looking into this is when you see, like, how did it actually evolve? It evolved in collaboration. So you see a lot of people giving reference to each other, like this part is what this person brought to it, and then together we created this framework. And if you want to go more deeply into extreme programming, you can look at the website Extreme Programming. This is by Don Wells. It was published in 1999. And in the same year, also the book XP Explained by Kent Beck was published. And in parallel, actually, Scrum evolved also in the 90s, also in collaboration. And later in the 2000s, the Scrum Alliance, and later then the Scrum Guide was founded or published. So yeah, the main part here is like Agile has old roots, and the origin of Agile is already collaboration. So if we're now looking into these values that were originally stated in XP, we find simplicity, communication, feedback, respect, and courage. And if we look at the Scrum values, it's no surprise that they overlap. So we find commitment, focus, openness, also respect, and also courage. So I'm going to look at these 8 values now. And I'm going to look at what principles do these Agile values foster. So simplicity. What? Wait a minute. So first of all, I'm going to read out what is stated in XP about simplicity. We will do what is needed and asked for, but no more. This will maximize the value created for the investment made to date. We will take small, simple steps to our goal and mitigate failures as they happen. We will create something that we're proud of and maintain it long-term for reasonable costs. So what are principles where we find the value of simplicity? No. So we find it in KISS, keep it simple and stupid. We find it in YAGNI, you ain't gonna need it. And we also find simplicity in the MVP approach. So whenever you're longing for simplicity, keep these principles in mind and think about reinforcing these principles. Communication. In XP, it's stated, everyone is part of the team and we communicate face to face together. We will work together on everything from requirements to code. We will create the best solution to our problem that we can together. So what we find here in depth is collective ownership. Very important principle. So whenever someone in an organization is asking for, I want to own this part, then your alarm bells should ring and you should advocate collective ownership. Also, a principle that fosters communication is in the daily stand-up, especially, but in general, asking for impediments. Is there anything blocking you? And then with the intent of supporting that person to unblock them. Then we have feedback. And they stated in XP, we will take every iteration commitment seriously by delivering working software. We demonstrate our software early and often, and then listen carefully and make any changes needed. We will talk about the project and adapt our process to it, not the other way around. So when we think about feedback, we have this principle of inspect and adapt. So this principle is strengthening the value of feedback, but also fail fast. The faster we get something out, the faster we can fail, and failure actually is feedback. So if we fail, we know we did something wrong, we can try it differently. And also the 4I principle, especially in software engineering, we are using pair programming and unfortunately, I think more often code reviews for the 4I principle. But this is really ingraining feedback into our process. And the faster we can fail, the faster we can get feedback from our fellow software engineers that we coded something wrong, the better, because we don't want to see the error pop up to the user. Then we have commitment from Scrum. The Scrum value of commitment is essential for building an agile culture. Scrum teams work together as a unit. This means that Scrum and Agile teams trust each other to follow through on what they say they're going to do. When team members aren't sure how work is going, they ask. Agile teams only agree to take on tasks they believe they can complete, so they are careful not to overcommit. Very important thing that we're talking about later as well, pull principle. So the pull principle is a principle that really ensures commitment. And if that principle is violated, then we can't live up to the value of commitment because if people are being pushed, if the work is being pushed to people instead of people are pulling it, how shall they commit? How shall they commit to a deadline that they didn't agree with? Also, from the Ruby community, it's nil till you ship it. Nil means null, no value. So what is also in this value of commitment is the idea of following through something. So if you are not shipping it, if you're not delivering the software, until then, it doesn't have any value. So it's really important to optimize for flow in order to live up to the value of commitment and to actually get it done, get it out of the door. And also similar from the DevOps community, you build it, you run it. Also an important principle that enforces or fosters commitment. If you really live up to this principle, you will have a good sense of commitment in your team. Then we have focus, Scrum. The Scrum value of focus is one of the best skilled Scrum teams can develop. Focus means that whenever Scrum teams start, they finish. So Agile teams are relentless about limiting the amount of work in progress. So very important principle coming from the Kanban philosophy, do not generate waste. Whenever we're generating waste, we're losing focus. Whenever we're optimizing for something that is not important right now, whenever we're planning something that is not important right now, whenever we're putting an item into our backlog that we will not finish timely, we are generating waste. And this is removing focus from the team. And also limit work in progress, taking that really seriously to understand how much can we actually work on at the same time. Then we have openness. Scrum teams consistently seek out new ideas and opportunities to learn. Agile teams are also honest when they need help. And this is also something that is, at least I saw that very rarely in organizations, that they really understand how to give space and opportunities for learning. Because this is often neglected for the benefit of 100% utilization. But neither if you're applying Scrum or if you're applying Kanban, the idea is not to do 100% utilization. But the idea in both frameworks is to generate slack time. So in Kanban, you generate slack time whenever you hit a WIP limit. Then you stop pulling work into the system, and then you will need to find something else to do instead of pulling more work into the system. You will go into swarming. You will help other people to resolve the problems that they have. And you can also pick a book and learn something or think about optimizing something in order to avoid hitting that bottleneck again. So this is how you can use the principle of slack time in Kanban and also in Scrum. And there I also see it very rarely that people really understand that. If you still have days at the end of the sprint and you have finished your sprint backlog, congrats, this is not a problem. You don't need to pull in new work from the backlog, but instead you have slack time now. So you can optimize, you can learn, you can inspect and adapt. And this is so important and something to really consider if you have never experienced that concept of slack time, if you are experiencing that management is asking you for 100% utilization. As a leader, you need to make space for learning. Then we have respect. In XP, everyone gives and feels the respect they deserve as a valued team member. Everyone contributes value, even if it's simply enthusiasm. Developers respect the expertise of the customers and vice versa. Management respects our right to accept responsibility and receive authority over our own work. And in Scrum team members demonstrate respect to one another, to the product owner, to stakeholders, and to the Scrum Master. Agile teams know that their strength lies in how well they collaborate and that everyone has a distinct contribution to make toward completing the work of the sprint. They respect each other's ideas, give each other permission to have a bad day once in a while, and recognize each other's accomplishments. So in respect, for me, the principle I wanted to link here is the prime directive, because this is first of all important in the retrospective, of course, but also as a leader in an agile environment. It's a very important mindset to be in. And the prime directive says, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at that time, their skills and abilities, the resources available, and the situation at hand. And I think the prime directive really shows how to ingrain respect in your daily work. And as a leader, I can really recommend to make the prime directive your own whenever you speak with someone, you want to give feedback, you want to help grow, that you really, really believe that they always did the best thing they could, because it will show and it will enable you to be a good leader, because people will then feel respected and trust your advice. Then we have courage. So courage is all about a blameless failure culture. So this is a principle in which courage shows to me if people feel I can talk openly about failures, I don't need much courage to do that, then it's a good culture that promotes courage. And sometimes you need to take on courage to role model that and to start establishing that blameless failure culture. And also from the DevOps community, if it hurts, do it more often. So if you're afraid of doing something, if you're afraid of doing the next deployment, um, take on the courage, do it more often until you're no longer afraid, until you no longer need that courage, but don't shy away from responsibility. Yeah. So summing up the Agile values, we have simplicity, we have communication, feedback, commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. So what can you do now with that? How to lead with Agile values? Um, so first of all, you can reflect on your own leadership style. You can use it and ask yourself, am I role modeling these values? You can also encourage self-reflection in your one-on-ones and ask the people, how can they role model Agile values? And you can also set Agile values as a topic for the retrospective and ask the team, do they live up to the expectation? Do they live up to Agile values? Also, and this is what I want to dive more deeply in now, you can ask better questions to resolve problems. So you can ask, is this Agile principle supporting is this Agile practice supporting the intended value or not? And here I'm going to share some examples. So coming back to our original complaints, our daily stand-up takes too long. How can you approach that? So if you are looking for the Agile value of courage, first of all, try to understand, is anyone afraid to raise a blocker? Or are they just communicating in artificial harmony? Because the stand-up is all about raising blockers and resolving them. And then in communication, are we actually talking about blockers and are we actually resolving them? Or is this not our focus in our daily stand-up? And focus, are we really limiting the conversation to getting things done, or are people reporting how busy they are? Because this is a very common anti-pattern in daily stand-ups, that people feel like they need to report that they contributed, that they worked. But instead, it's okay, we trust you to do your work, and please tell us when something doesn't work for you. And this is professional to say that there's a problem, to raise it, and not to be shy about it and to think, okay, I need to get it all done by myself. Then looking at, we can't rely on the engineer's estimates. What can we do there? We can look for commitment. Are we adhering to the pull principles, or is it managers pushing down deadlines with a fixed scope? If yes, we can't create any commitment, and then, of course, we can't rely on the estimates. Courage also. Do people openly disagree with each other when estimating? Do they disagree with the product owner if they are pushing them? Like, can you do it in 1 hour or in one day? So if they are pushing them, are they pushing back and saying, no, it's not possible? Are they disagreeing with the most senior person on the team? Or are they just following the estimation that the most senior person on the team is giving? That's not helpful. That's also not helpful for the most senior person on the team because they might be wrong. Openness. Do we leave space for learning? So are we trying to get 100% utilization? Yeah, it's that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy then, if we're aiming at 100% utilization. If we're planning in slack time into the system, if we're planning in learning and in security, then we're better off. So we should also consider the value of openness when we're talking about estimates. We have too many meetings. Let's look at that, and let's look at better questions to ask when people complain about having too many meetings. Focus. Do we have one priority, or are we generating waste? And this is something that I see in so many teams that they are doing this wrong, that they're having priorities, plural, and not one priority. And also when we're talking about sprint goals, it shouldn't be a list. It should be one, so that you can prioritize, because priority means the first one. And we should use that word seriously. And generating waste, it's all about, there is a feature coming up. It's not so important, but nevertheless, I'm dragging some people into a meeting just to get an estimate, even though it's in 3 months ahead planned. That's waste. We shouldn't have such meetings that are not solving immediate problems for the immediate priority. Feedback. Can people reject meetings if they don't think that they can add value? That's about meeting culture and about putting feedback into your process. So if people don't feel that they can contribute but are held hostage in a meeting, that's not helpful. That also won't improve the meeting. If someone invites you to a meeting and doesn't have an agenda and doesn't have a plan, but just wants to ramble along and exchange some thoughts without any structure or any purpose, any goal, what to get out of that meeting, and everyone just rejects it, then the person who invited for that meeting will prepare better the next time. If you don't have that culture, you will continue to have such meetings that are boring and not helpful. And respect. Is everyone given the autonomy they need to take on responsibility, or do they need meetings to ask for permission? And this is also a very common anti-pattern, that people are not empowered enough to make small decisions by themselves, and then they need to put all of that into the meeting. So you also need to be clear about what are people able to decide as a pair or even as an individual, so that they all don't always have to ask for permission, and that you don't have lengthy meetings. Yeah, and closing that, I now would just sum up what we did here. We talked about what are Agile values. We talked about what principles do Agile values foster. So what principles can you strengthen when you want to strengthen an Agile value? And also how to lead with Agile values, how to ask better questions. And now I'd like to get some feedback of what is your takeaway? What did you learn today?